take a moment and allow yourself to really arrive. The body is here. But allow the awareness, the attention, the consciousness to fully arrive. Draw that awareness inward. We withdraw the senses from the world around us. And we turn that sharp awareness, that full awareness, to the world inside. Draw the awareness to your breath. Don't try to change the breath, but just allow the awareness to merge with it as it gently flows in and flows out. If the mind wanders, just gently bring it back. Don't yell at it, don't get caught up in a story or analysis. But just lovingly bring it back. If you find that the mind still wanders, add a very gentle mantra to it. You can add the mantra of so hum. It means I am that. I am one with the Creator and one with the creation. I am that. सबरी अपने phones को बंद करें या silent पे रखें. Let's make sure all of the phones are on silent. So we chant silently to ourselves. So on the inhalations. on the exhalations. So take them at your own pace. Don't force them, don't manipulate them. Just allow the waves of prana to come into you like waves of the ocean coming up onto shore. And just allow that awareness to stay merged with it. Just stay anchored and grounded in the breath. The mind loves to be distracted, to be attracted by sounds and sensations, by thoughts and memories. But whenever you notice it's been distracted, just bring it back. Bring it back to the breath. Slowly and gently bring the palms of your hands together at chest level and rub them gently against each other. Press the palms of your hands against your closed eyes. Slowly open the eyes and lower the hands. Welcome to Satsang. So beautiful to be together with you all. We'll start as always with a question that comes in online, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. What to do if while offering seva, we unintentionally hurt someone? So, whenever we unintentionally, whenever we unintentionally hurt someone, whatever we're doing, the path is really clear. The first thing to do, of course, is to see whether you can fix it. Is there anything you can do to fix it? I mean, let's say that in my seva, I'm rushing to get somewhere to do something that's going to help others. And in my rushing to get there, I accidentally bump into somebody and I knock them down. Well, the very first and most important thing to do is to see, can I help them up? Can I get them right back up? Can I make sure that they're not hurt? Can I do whatever is needed in that moment to fix whatever happened through me, even though I didn't mean for it to happen, even though my intentions were fully pure? And that happens to us a lot, whether we're actively engaged in seva or not. We move through our world with as much honesty, goodness, openness, dharma, truth, love, as we can. But things happen. Things happen through us. We accidentally bump somebody. You accidentally do something that you didn't even realize was going to be hurtful to someone else. That happens a lot. We're just doing our thing, and the next thing you know, you realize that somebody's been hurt or insulted by something you did. And you didn't mean it. You didn't realize it. So the first thing is you do whatever you can to fix it. The faster you can fix it, the better. Because then that karma is over. You knock somebody down, hopefully they're not hurt, you help them back up, brush them off, give them a hug, maybe give them a glass of water, make sure nothing's happened. They're fine. You move on. The karmic exchange, that karmic file, is over then. Sometimes it's more subtle. Sometimes you don't necessarily know that you hurt someone until much later. They tell you, or someone else tells you, you know, when you did that hurt this person, or that hurt me, and here's why. Well, again, as fast as you can, try to remedy it. Saying I'm sorry doesn't mean that you are to blame. A lot of us think, well, why should I say I'm sorry? Like, I didn't do it on purpose. It's not my fault. I was being nice. I was being kind. I was being efficient and effective. You got insulted. That's not my fault. Why I should say sorry? But that misunderstands the benefit of I'm sorry. I'm sorry doesn't mean I'm an awful person who committed a horrible mistake. I'm sorry just means I feel sad that you're hurt. Right? I mean, if a good friend of ours or someone we know loses a loved one, we say, my God, I'm so sorry for your loss. Doesn't mean you killed their loved one. Doesn't mean that you're to blame in some way for their loved one's passing. But I'm sorry, meaning my heart goes out to you. I feel sad for your pain. So if someone is hurt, intentionally, unintentionally, knowingly, unknowingly, through something you did, whether you think they legitimately should be hurt or whether you think it's crazy that they're hurt, either way, we don't want people hurt around us. So you say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're hurt. Is there something I can do? Again, that doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that you are at fault. In the same way that when that friend lost a loved one, you would say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Is there something I can do? So say, I'm sorry. Ask if there's something you can do. Sometimes there is. Sometimes the person will say, yeah, you know what, if you did this, it would fix it. If you can do that, then great. So fix it as quickly as you can. Sometimes, though, and we all have had experiences like this in our lives with family, friends, colleagues, community members, where there are people who get hurt a lot. They get hurt from things that are certainly not intentional, but also things that when you look at, you think, well, God, really, most people wouldn't be hurt in that circumstance. And they hold on to hurt. And even when you say sorry or you ask, if there's something you can do, they still hold that grudge or that bitterness. And that's where it's really important for the third step, which is forgive yourself. Just because someone's holding a grudge against you doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. Just because someone has been hurt doesn't mean that you are at fault. So, first, if you can fix it in that moment, fix it. If you can't fix it in the moment, but when as soon as you find out you can fix it then, fix it. That's what making amends means. When you've hurt someone, you make amends. Whether it was 5 minutes ago or 15 years ago. But if neither of those things works, to fix the relationship, to make that person no longer hurt, and there isn't anything else you can do, but they are not prepared to let it go, that's when you need to just forgive yourself and to pray for them. You can always pray for somebody, whether they ask for it or not, whether they want it or not. You can always pray. Send them love, send them kindness. Just pray for them. May they find peace. May they find joy. May they find ease. May they find health and wellness in their hearts and their minds. Because we know people, all of us do, who are just always looking for someone to be angry at, for someone to blame for why they are not happy in the present moment. And for a lot of us, especially those of us on a path of spirituality, it's really easy to take that on and to feel like, my God, wow, there must be something wrong with me. How was I so blind? How was I so insensitive? And while I'm very much in favor of personal insight and introspection, contemplation, it's just as important to also realize that it's not always about you. Sometimes you just happen to be the convenient reason that someone's hurt today. And so, if you take those 3 steps, first 2 are about fixing it with them, immediately or later, whenever possible. And the third step being fixing it with yourself when you can't fix it with them. Then you'll be able to clear yourself. But some introspection, some contemplation, some insight is always beneficial. And if you do find that people get hurt by you, perhaps more than you'd like, more than you intend, it's worth a bit of introspection to just say, is there something happening through me? Maybe it's just I'm too busy. Maybe it's just my mind really isn't there. And I'm metaphorically rushing through the world, kind of knocking people over as I go by. Or maybe I've got some other inner issues that I'm not looking at. That's always beneficial. And that doesn't mean things are your fault. So especially when you're engaged in seva, make sure that you don't end up taking on someone else's stuff. Use whatever you can as pathways into your own sadhana, your own clarity, your own opening. But don't take on someone else's work by thinking that you are the problem. It's something that a lot of us on spiritual paths are very eager to do. Oh, it must be me. It must be me. And it's beautiful to have that willingness and that courage to look at yourself. But it's also really important to understand that not everything's about you. Because then otherwise it's just another ego trip. Oh my God, it's all about me. I'm the one who hurt that person. And as we're working to free ourselves of the ego, it's important to recognize that a lot of times other people's stuff is just their stuff. And we give them as much love as we possibly can, as much compassion and tenderness and care as we possibly can. But we don't take on their stuff. And this is true, by the way, regardless of whether you are actively engaged in doing seva or whether you're just trying to navigate your way through a dharmic, yogic, righteous, spiritual life. Because it's the same things arise. Wonderful. Questions here? Anyone with any questions here?
We generally are taught that everything that is happening is already fixed.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, from the childhood, we generally are taught that everything what is happening is already fixed, right? So, I just want to know, is there any concept like free will, or is it that it is already fixed? So,
great.
Yeah.
The timeless, evergreen destiny and free will conundrum. There's definitely free will. Absolutely. And here's why I say that. I'm a scientist at heart. And so for me, I'm always looking for evidence. Whether it's in my personal experience, whether it's in the experience of people I trust, my guru, other enlightened masters, whether it's something that comes to us from scripture. So, if you look at all of our scriptures, not only within the Hindu tradition, but if you look across the world at the different world religions, the different scriptures, the different seers and sages and teachers, there's many things in common amongst them. And one of the things in common is they all give teachings about how to get more clear, more in alignment with what we call our dharma, but you could also just say your purpose, goodness, righteousness. And they're teachings like the 10 Commandments, or yam and niyam, right? Which are essentially our 10 Commandments, right? The sage Patanjali gave them to us, how to live. So we're given instructions on how to live, and we're given instructions for spiritual practices, meditation, yoga, generosity, giving, compassion. The scriptures are full of teachings, devotion, bhakti, how to be a good devotee, how to be a good karma yogi, how to go on a path of gyan, how to be generous, how to serve. Now you think, if everything were already fixed and we had no free will, why would God keep giving us instructions? Like, what would be the point? If nothing we did mattered, why bother? Why meditate? Why pray? Why serve? Why be honest? Why not commit adultery? Why not lie or steal? I mean, if my entire destiny is fixed and unchangeable, nothing I can do that makes any difference whatsoever, well, then it takes every teaching we've ever got about how to live, and it renders them absolutely useless and meaningless. And I just don't believe that thousands and thousands of years of sages and saints and rishis and mystics and yogis and prophets of all the different world religions would give us teachings and scriptures guiding us just to make us run in circles or on, like hamsters on treadmills, that none of it mattered. I mean, for example, they started putting labels on boxes of cigarettes that said, smoking causes cancer, smoking causes death. And in India, they're really graphic. In the West, they're not quite so graphic, but the labels in India have got these, horrible pictures. They're really graphic. It's great. But they only started putting those on cigarette boxes when the research was in that tobacco actually caused cancer. For the first many decades of the popularity of cigarettes, nobody was warned against them. Then the research showed they're going to kill you, so they started putting labels. There was a direct causation between research proving this causes cancer and other diseases and instructions to people to stop smoking. If we didn't get any evidence that it caused cancer or killed us, they never would have told people to stop. If there were no evidence that exercising was good for your health, doctors would not be telling us to exercise. The research comes in that says exercise is good for your health, and our doctors tell us exercise. Research comes in that says fruits and vegetables are good for your health. We get told, eat more fruits and vegetables. On a spiritual level, only because the facts are in that what we do makes a difference, have all of the spiritual teachers given us instructions after instructions after instructions of how to live. So yes, there's absolutely free will. It absolutely makes a difference. And we carry karmic seeds, you could say, from past births, from earlier in this life, that are in various stages of blossoming and fruiting. And since we can't rewind history and unplant those seeds, we know they are going to be blossoming in our life at some point, whether right now, whether next month or next year or next life, they're going to blossom. But they don't blossom by themselves. Those seeds of the past blossom along with the seeds we plant today. And so yes, there is an element of what you would call destiny, meaning that over which I have no control, simply because it's what I've already done. If you've got an exam today, if you're in school and there's an exam, and you spent the whole last week partying with your friends, you didn't go to school, you didn't study, you didn't even sleep, and you show up in the exam, well, there's a really good chance you're going to fail. There's not much you can do about it at that moment sitting in the exam center. Because of all the choices you made over the past week, chances are your destiny with this exam is to fail. The best you can do is hope for, some kind of minor earthquake that makes them evacuate the room and postpone the exam till next week so you get a chance to redo it. But otherwise, you're kind of stuck by decisions that you made in the past. But it doesn't mean you're stuck forever. It doesn't mean you can never study again or pass an exam again. It just means right here, right now, the decisions you made in the past have created a situation right now that you can't undo. You can't rewind the last week and go back and study. So you may end up stuck failing this exam. But you can study very well for the next one. You can learn a great lesson about time management, about sincerity. You can make different choices in the future. You could even go up to the teacher after the exam and say, look, I made horrible decisions. Is there any way I can make it up? And that's what free will is. Free will gives us the opportunity to say, you know what? In the past, these are the seeds I planted. But today, I'm going to plant different seeds so that the trees that blossom in my life tomorrow, next week, next month, next life, are different than the very stuck situation I currently find myself in. I always say, this moment is the pre of that which is predestined for you in the future. I'll say that again. This moment is the pre of that which is predestined for your future. Right here, right now, you are planting those seeds that will blossom in the garden of your life in the future. So in the future, when you look back and you say, well, it was predestined, well, you are predestining it today, if that's a verb. You're making those decisions for your future right now. And that's where our free will comes in. So we can make wise decisions. So the trees that blossom in our life are sweet. Other questions? Yeah, Afridya.
We always say that God does, whatever happens is always for the best, and God is very kind, and He looks after the whole universe. Why people like Hitler ever existed and became successful, killing millions of people, and where would our faith go in terms of accepting God's wish?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And there isn't an easy answer. The way that I think about it is God has created the universe. God is kind. I don't know that you could say everything that happens is for the best. I think that's more of what we would consider a platitude than a truism. I think it's something we say to make people feel better. I'm not sure that it's actually true. Everything that happens is in service of our own awakening. So if you look at it like that, then yes, it's for the best. But I think that we could certainly come up with a best that was better than a lot of people suffering. The fact that people were able to get closer to God, to have awarenesses, to have realizations. There's definitely a part of me that wonders, well, wasn't there another way for them to have that realization? And I don't know the answer to that. So I know that God is kind. I know that God is there. I know that God is perfect in the creation. But I don't think that God micromanages everybody's free will. I think that this is why we are counseled to turn to God. Because I think it is in the act of turning to God that God then responds. I remember when I first came to India, Pujya Swamiji told me a story. You have to bear with the story, realizing that he was telling it to a 25-year-old American PhD student who knew nothing about Hinduism, zero, nothing about India. So he told me the story like this. He said one day, God was having lunch with his wife. And I remember I was like, what? God, lunch, his wife? What do you mean? Now, obviously, the story was vaster and more complex, but instead of getting into the names of the different divine manifestations who he knew I wasn't going to know who they were, he was trying to make a point. So he simplified it. He said, so one day, God was having lunch with his wife, and he said, suddenly in the middle of lunch, God got up and he ran out. And his wife thought, oh my God, what happened? And a few minutes later, God came back and sat down and finished his lunch. And his wife said, and of course, you know, when you talk about God's wife, we understand that we're speaking about, you know, Lakshmi Narayans, you know, that he's talking about a divine Shakti, and he was just oversimplifying it for my American sensibilities so I would understand what was happening in the story. So he said, God's wife asked, what happened? Where'd you go? Why did you run up and, run out in the middle of your lunch and then come back? And God said, well, one of my very, very close disciples, devotees, was being beaten on and hurt and called out for me. And so I knew I had to run and immediately take care of him. But then, just as I had gotten out the door, the guy picked up a stick and started beating everybody else. And so I thought, well, all right, if he wants to handle it that way, I'll go back and finish my lunch. Now, it's obviously a guru's oversimplifying of a complex story for a not very attuned mind at that time. But the moral was very clear, which is, we've been given free will. God is there as we turn to God. If we turn away from God, obviously we are going to suffer the consequences. Obviously the law of karma is there to make sure that whatever seeds we plant are going to bear fruit in our lives. But I don't think that God micromanages. I think that's why he gave free will. I don't think that he's there micromanaging, making sure that no one lies, that no one hurts, that no one harms. I think he's given us free will. He's given us scripture to guide us. He's given us what we call buddhi, our intellect, our intelligence, shuddhi, our purity, for us to use them, to turn back toward God. And yeah, as there is day, there is night. As there is light, there is darkness. And as there is goodness, there's deep, 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 dark ignorance. We don't think so much about evil because the soul is pure. But there's so much ignorance sometimes that gets so attached to the body, to the way of thinking, that it absolutely blinds us. And when it blinds us, it hurts others. How someone like that wasn't, struck by lightning earlier in his life, I don't know. If I were running the universe, I certainly would have done that. But I remember when I was doing my PhD, I had a teacher whose husband was a chaplain. And they were very, very religious. And this teacher, she worked with children who were dying of AIDS. And one day someone in my class asked her, because of course none of us were very religious, and everybody was very sort of bewildered by somebody who was very religious. And somebody asked her, they said, how do you hold on to your belief in this perfect God and this divine plan while you spend so many hours every day with children who are suffering and dying due to no fault of their own? And she said something that I love so much, and I've held it so deeply as I've become a deeply religious person. She said, I never doubt the perfection of God's plan. I never doubt the perfection of God, that presence of the divine plan. She said, but I do sometimes find myself asking him whether maybe there couldn't be a better plan. And I loved that because it brings in that humanness that we all have, which is we're not able to see the full tapestry. So when you say it's all for the best, it depends what you mean. The best in this moment? Of course not. How could that possibly be the best? There's absolutely no scale whatsoever of any valid measure by which that level of suffering is the best. And if we expand the scale, and so instead of from looking at this intersection of time and space, those physical bodies that those souls had taken for that part of their karmic journey, and we're able to expand our vision of the tapestry, not just decades, but hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. I do believe that there would come a time at which that vision of the tapestry would give us a sense of, oh, it would make sense. We would understand why that all had to happen the way it happened. It's like when you look at Lord Ram. Why was he sent off? This embodiment of goodness, of dharma, of integrity. Well, it doesn't make sense until you go all the way back to Shravan Kumar. And King Dasharat having killed him in the curse that Shravan Kumar's parents gave to King Dasharat, that as we are dying due to a broken heart of the loss of our son, so you too will die someday of a broken heart due to the loss of your son. He had no son at that time. But if we look at Bhagwan Ram being exiled in just that intersection of time and space, it's why we look at Kaikeyi and we think, she's the evil one, or she was brainwashed by her maid. We look at it very narrowly. But you go back far enough and you go back to Shravan Kumar and we say, oh, okay. And that doesn't mean it's for the best, but suddenly it all makes sense. Suddenly the tapestry is full and it makes sense. And I do believe that if we go back far enough, all of this awful evil that we see would somehow make sense in a global tapestry. But that doesn't mean it's for the best in the moment, or that it's something that should be repeated on any level. Sometimes I think that there are souls that on some cosmic level, willingly, consciously, take certain births for the purpose of teaching the world a lesson. That somehow on some cosmic level, these souls of those people who came in as the 6 million people who were killed by him, that somehow there was some cosmic agreement that they had, seeing where our world was going, seeing the hatred, seeing what could have happened. And somehow they agreed that they were going to take birth in a way that that's what they were going to go through, so that years later, we're still saying never again. 80 years later, when there is anti-Semitism that pops up, everybody stands up and says we need to address this. When there is discrimination, when there's violence, that people are so attuned to the possibility of what could happen, that there's an entire office at the United Nations of genocide prevention. That there's been a ripple impact in the universe, in the world of what's happened after that. That sometimes I think maybe the explanation isn't looking at how it could happen and what those people had done in the past, but rather a cosmic sort of covenant in a way that they all took to sacrifice that particular life in the service of a huge ripple impact on planet Earth. Yeah. Yeah, Bia.
So the question that I have for you today is, I often find myself seeking social validation and external validation in a lot of social settings. And I do that, and I catch myself doing that to fuel my ego, and then my ego gets inflated. And when I don't receive this validation, I become insecure. So I just want to know if there's a way I can diminish or curb this want, this desire to be socially validated, to prove myself superior in social settings.
Beautiful. First of all, recognize that the urge for external validation, and even for a sense of superiority in that external validated way, is really natural. It's something everyone wants. People should like me. They should appreciate me. They should like me more than other people. They should appreciate me more than other people. You know, you go back to young kids standing, waiting to be chosen for the baseball team, right? Well, we all know every time somebody's going to be chosen last. But everyone who's chosen last feels horrible about themselves. Everyone wants to be chosen first. So it's built into our psyches. So don't feel badly. Don't feel like it means there's something wrong with you. It goes back evolutionarily. If we were the ones most desirable, we were the ones most likely to get mated with, therefore our genes were the ones that continued. So there's actually an evolutionary advantage to that desire. But since we're not just physical beings, since even though the goal of the physical body may be simply to propagate so that its genes continue, the goal of the soul is something far beyond that. The goal of our true self is far beyond that. So that's where we find ourselves having to look at and then learn not to be dictated by the calls of that physical body and all of what it wants from us. So you're already walking there when you recognize this is ego. And really the way to do it is to develop a different sense of identity. So for example, if my identity is rooted in what I look like, then the validation I'm always going to want from people is people should tell me I'm beautiful. You know, when I meet them, they should kind of look me up and down nicely and then smile, and I should feel like they like what they see. They should comment on my beauty or nice aspects of my body or nice things I'm wearing or whatever it may be. If I identify with my intelligence, then I think everybody should think I'm really smart. They should listen to what I say. They should be impressed by what I say. If I want people to validate the work that I do, then again, that's what I'm expecting, is that they should see it, they should see it carefully, they should appreciate it, they should acknowledge it, they should give me raises and promotions or more work. So based on what my identification is, I'm going to look for validation in that way. The key to solving that dilemma is come up with a different identification. Realize you're not your body. You're not your intellect. You're not your achievements. You are soul. You are spirit. You are consciousness. You are love. You are truth. You are divinity. And really allow yourself to experience that. It begins internally. Long before you're looking for someone else's validation, when you look in the mirror and your mind goes, God, you look so great today, instead, remind yourself, I am not this. I am not that. When you look in the mirror, instead of looking at your nose or your cheeks or your hair or your waist, look in your eyes. Look deep within you. Start to see yourself as soul, rather than as achievement or body or intellect or success. And as your way of self-identification changes, that which you look for in the world will change. You know, it's like you take someone like, let's say, Einstein. So Einstein didn't move through the world waiting for women to, whistle at him. He moved through the world as a genius for people to recognize the truth of what he was saying. You could whistle at him or not whistle at him all day long as he walked down the street. He wouldn't notice or care. In the same way, change your sense of identity. Instead of from what I'm doing, what I know, what I'm achieving, what I look like, to I'm soul, I'm spirit, I'm love. How am I anchoring in that as I move through my day? Let that be the way you self-identify. How much did I remember who I am today? How much did I see the world as soul, as spirit? Because the more you judge others on that same level, it just perpetuates that sense of me versus you, who's being validated, who's better. Can you see others also as soul? Stop judging others by their intellect or their achievements or their success or their bodies. See how much you can see others as soul, as consciousness, as divinity, as love. And then that need for them to validate the workings of your brain or the workings of your hands or your achievement, it'll dissipate on its own because you'll realize that's not really who I am. And you'll find yourself very self-confident in who you really are, not needing that sense of validation for the ego self. And as you see others as soul, you'll be doing them a beautiful favor as well, because you'll be creating a space in which they too can move out of that identification. Beautiful. We'll take the rest of the questions in our next satsang. There won't be satsang tomorrow, unfortunately. I'm going to Delhi for a day. I will be back late night tomorrow night, but not in time for satsang. So we will gather again for satsang day after tomorrow on the 28th. Today is Monday. Huh? Monday, right? We'll gather on Wednesday again for satsang. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening and next 2 days. And I look so forward to seeing you all day after tomorrow. And so much love to you all.